West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Nearly every state in the country is redrawing their congressional districts after the 2020 census, and 4 have already enacted their new maps. Now, these redistricting efforts are critical, especially for Black and Brown communities, because when has gerrymandering ever worked in our favor? Joining me to discuss is Michael Lee, Senior Counsel for the Brennan Center's Democracy Program, and Doug Spencer, Election Law Scholar and Professor at the University of Colorado. Michael, I want to kick it off with you because I've been reading your research at the Brennan Center, and it's quite fascinating and something that, quite frankly, we've been dealing with for a long time. Now, explain, because a lot of people, this has not been a big issue that's easily digestible for a lot of people across the country. We're narrowly focused on voting rights in the state houses and at the federal level, but gerrymandering can have a direct impact on who has a voice when it comes to these federal elections and who doesn't. Explain it for us.
Yeah, I think people have been right to focus on the attacks on voting rights that make it harder for folks to vote. But gerrymandering is sort of the flip side of that, right? And even if you run the gauntlet and are able to do all of the things that you have to do to be able to vote, what gerrymandering does is essentially renders your vote meaningless because the results of the election will be predetermined by the way that the districts are drawn, either because they are drawn to discriminate against people of color or to guarantee a political effect or both. And, that's something that can be in place for the whole of the decade, right? It's not just about the 2022 election. You hear a lot of people talking about the 2022 election, but really this is about who will hold power and what democracy will look like for the whole of the decade to come.
And I think you make a really good point. And I want to make it really clear to our viewers what happened in Texas. So we talked a bit about this in the intro, but the map that they've drawn in Texas, Doug, it distinguishes as people of color, they were responsible for 92 or 95% of the state's population over the last decade, with Latinos making up nearly 2 million. That's almost half of the state's 4 million additional residents. So when we look at that in that context, it really does dilute the voting power. So, when I look at how to get out of this, is it possible for Democrats to acknowledge that, yes, gerrymandering is wrong, but for Democrats to actually gerrymander in areas where they can just to fight the practice?
Well, this is something that Democrats are in a debate about right now among themselves, particularly if you look in the state of New York. New York has an independent commission. Democrats in the state ceded authority, or at least under Governor Cuomo, had kind of ceded authority of redistricting to an independent commission. Not completely independent because some of the members are appointed by legislators in that state. And the commission's drawing maps and is split about this, but there's some debate about whether the Democrats in the state legislature should use their supermajority to override the maps that are drawn by this commission in order to maximize the number of seats that Democrats can get in the state, precisely for this reason that you bring up, to counteract what Democrats fear may be happening in Georgia or Texas or other states where Republicans control the process, and which at least on early drafts of maps in Texas suggest that the voting rights of people of color will be muted.
which is so incredibly problematic as we face all of these attacks on voting rights. Michael, something that I found really interesting is that Census policy says that the incarcerated are counted in the states where they are incarcerated. But this makes no sense because it's not like that the incarcerated can hold their elected representatives accountable, for one. And two, upon their release, they go back to their home states. How is this practice legal, and what can we do to stop that?
Well, what you're talking about, Tiffany, is prison gerrymandering, what is commonly called prison gerrymandering. And that's the practice of counting incarcerated people at the sites of the prison rather than in their home communities, even though they may only spend a short time in prison and be back in their home communities before you know it. The reality is in most of the country, prisons are located oftentimes in very rural areas. In New York, where I am right now, most of the prisons are located upstate. Most of the people in prison come from the downstate, the New York City area, and that's the same in Texas and other states. And so the effect of that is to give more power to rural, oftentimes whiter areas, and to have less political power for urban areas where most of the prisoners come from. And it's completely distortive. It's something that the Census Bureau itself has thought about changing. It didn't do so last decade. It may do so in the future, but some states are changes, like California and New York, will voluntarily reallocate incarcerated people back to their home communities to make sure that they're counted where they ultimately have the ties and where they ultimately go back to, and to eliminate this really distortive practice that dilutes the power, particularly of Black and Latino communities, because of the mass incarceration problem that we have in the United States.
So, and some would argue that practice was the punishing criminal justice system was created to dilute the power of Black and brown voices. So, Doug, the common theme here between all of these, erosions on our democracy is how can we keep these Black and brown folks out of exercising their civic engagements? It's exhausting, and it's been happening for hundreds of years. How can we make the issue of gerrymandering more digestible and a bigger issue to take this message to voters when it's time to ask folks to show up to vote in their, local state representatives and school board elections and all these other places, because that's where these decisions are getting made, right? At these state houses. And, it's just exhausting to have to keep convincing people to fight to save these legislative failures.
There's so much attention paid on congressional districts. It's unbelievable, because most of the actions happening in the state legislatures, town councils, school boards, issues that affect our lives directly, far more elections happening. But the same pattern, as you noted, keeps creeping up over and over. Whether it's prison gerrymandering, you led off with this story about Texas. The Texas population is about 40% white and about 40% Latino in that state. And people of color represented about 90% of the growth between 2010 and 2020. So to not increase the number of effective opportunity districts for people of color in the state of Texas itself would already be remarkable. But to then remove some of these districts, which it looks like is happening in these maps, it's unbelievable. I don't think that it would survive a Voting Rights Act lawsuit. But I will say the harm sometimes is not just that people of color are unable to make it to the ballot box, or when they do come to the ballot box, their vote is diluted in some way. The harm sometimes is expressive. It's a statement from the state government that we don't care about your voices, and we want to make sure that you know that. And so I see that as part of the point sometimes. And I think that's what's going on in Texas. They know that this map that they put forward wouldn't survive a Voting Rights Act challenge, but it's serving the purpose of expressing the will of the state that some people belong in the political community and some don't. And as you noticed, this is not the first time this has happened. This is a long-standing problem in the United States politics.
It's the temerity for me, Doug, the people who built this country, to blatantly say, we don't care about your participation in this process. It's exhausting and enraging at the same time.
It is Monday, the 11th of October of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. Yes, we've sliced and diced and constructed what was left over from the weekend, because that's what you do on Mondays when you're open. There's some that don't open on Mondays, so they just wait until Tuesday. All right. And then they don't even have a River City Hash dish. Dive right into the week. Well, we do it differently here at this salon, because we have food for the brain, as they say. Maybe even the soul. Maybe. Well, how are you doing? Was it a quiet weekend for you? Well, I don't know. There was a Nazi rally that C-SPAN decided to televise. What's that all about? C-SPAN. First of all, Trump has not really officially said that he's running. Everybody knows he's going to try. But, C-SPAN said, or implied, because I didn't talk to C-SPAN themselves, but apparently C-SPAN decided that, it's a campaign. Okay. So that gave it merit, I suppose. It looked like a Nazi rally to me. And it was. So C-SPAN, I know what the cable companies are doing. They don't want to be carrying C-SPAN anymore. You do remember that the cable companies, to exist, had to give some sort of like community service, that socialist thing. Yeah, we'll get to that in just a moment. My pet peeve for this day. But the cable companies were and are still required to carry C-SPAN. That was their agreement, so that they could make unfettered amounts of money that the government just said, yeah, go ahead, here, do it. And got rid of the fairness doctrine in the midst of it. Mm-hmm. Yep. And here we are. Fox News, OAN, all of them. They can just be propaganda outlets and call it news because there's no fairness doctrine. Everybody says, we don't want to go back to that. Well, I don't know. It seems like it kept the Nazis at bay a little bit. People will say, yeah, but it kept all the other voices that we could have been hearing. Well, I guess, maybe. I know. Didn't stop them from taking the Smothers Brothers off for getting a little too critical of the sitting president, did they? Why is it like the Republicans always commit these crimes and they always seem to get away with it? Oh, well, we can't go after our opponents because it would seem unseemly. That's the Democrats speaking. And the Republicans are all, let's jail their asses the first chance we get. People keep voting for them. And if we can't get rid of voting, and then a little light bulb went off in their heads, and they said, you know what, if we can keep them from voting, it'll be just like the good old days. Except we only had to keep them from voting when they were, of a certain hue. Which is also a simplification of the matter, because there are a lot of white people that were kept from voting because they were friends with the people of a certain hue. It never stops them. If the rules are stacked against them, they ignore the rules or change them in some capricious way. Yep. So, are they going to issue subpoenas, or are we going to get into the phase of now we're going to really, really, really be concerned about maybe issuing a subpoena? Well, actually, let me back up. They're issuing the subpoenas. How about enforcing the subpoenas? Now, I wasn't happy. I thought that McDougal was put into jail for at the time, I thought it was a miscarriage of justice. And let's be clear, it was. The Republicans would do anything to keep the hippies from having any kind of legitimacy. Because, let's be clear, the Clintons were hippies in the minds of these squares. It really boils down to that. The squares determine that everybody who's not square is some sort of like mob. Mud people. Any sort of racial, bigoted elimination is BS. Squares seem to hold the levers of power and always have. So anytime a creative, shall we say, gets into power. Like anywhere else in the world, the creatives get to be president. Here, man, you're that's the worst thing that could ever happen to a representative democracy, is that somebody with imagination for good might have power. Because what would they do? Just give away things. While at the same time, these people are giving away and raking in and, because it's got to be the right kind of people. The right kind of people. Okay. Yeah, it can't happen here, huh? Yes, it can happen here, and it's happening right now. So, we do have a story on the right-wing attempt to, well, at the top, that was actually a rundown of what is happening right now. The gerrymandering going on. Why don't we gerrymander? Yeah, why don't we? According to the Republicans here in Oregon, that's exactly what we're doing because the census allowed us to have one more district. And the Republicans are all up in arms because, oh no, more Democrats. We got to keep more Democrats voting. And what's this BS? Anybody who comes into the United States is immediately going to be a Democrat. It takes a little while before you can actually vote. They think. They're out there believing that how many millions of underage kids voted? That's the lie they're floating now, right? So, it's not a big leap to go from that belief to asylum seekers who happen, I don't know, in their minds, they hear asylum, and that's the worst thing in the world. They want asylum. They want help. From the most grievance-filled group of people we've ever seen in the history of the world. My grievance is so important, more important than everything around me, even the survival of the earth. Okay. And we let them get away with it because, they're just upset. We have to find some sort of common ground. What's the common ground? VX gas? Give me a break. I don't want to go there. And I feel that that's exactly where we're going. Of course, I have considered draconian measures in which to alleviate this, pressure cooker, shall we say. Except the problem is that it causes more pressure. And what is that? I joke around a lot about, we could just lock the gate on their gated communities and keep them all in. They have everything they need. We could still supply it. Their food and their water. We'll even let them have their water fountains in the fake lake in the park. Even have a little marina in the fake lake. Jesus. Got everything. Botox places. They don't want to have vaccines, but they can get Botox. So you can let them have that. Nail polishing, the whole deal. Okay? Maybe they won't even know they're incarcerated. But we can subtly, I don't know, some people call it re-educate. I also make the joke that you have to first educate them before you re-educate them. So maybe actually educating them in the basics of American civics. What's the basics of American civics? The person with the most votes wins. Not some technicality, not some sort of passive electors that you've assigned by some state commission. It's the people of the United States. Australia, for instance, has about 98% voting from their population because it's mandatory to vote. Why don't we do that here? Oh, we have to have a choice. No, you don't. You vote. That doesn't mean you have to vote for everything, but you got to vote. That's why it always cracked me up. Some people misunderstood back in the day when I said, it's my right not to vote for president. That didn't mean that I was not going to vote for the measures. That wasn't going to vote for a Congress critter or a senator. If I thought that maybe the presidential candidates were not up to timber, I wasn't going to vote for them. Well, that never was the case. But, I remember arguing that. People misunderstood, going, oh, well, you always said that you didn't think it was right to vote. People only hear what they want to hear. So I learned my lesson. Don't get metaphysical with a bunch of Nazis. Yeah, I know, there are some educated Nazis, but you don't want to get metaphysical with them either. Please. Look what happened before. Anyway, these transactional types believe in only one thing. What's in it for me? Help another person? What's in it for me? So they think the whole world is that. Complete self-interest, selfishness, self-centered, narcissism, to the point of a psychosis. What's in it for me? Instead of, we should be helping other people with no idea that we're going to get anything in return. That's called unconditional. So that's where I would start in the little gated community re-education camp. We'll call it a facility. They even have malls. They'll have a mall. Neiman Marcus. We'll bring back Neiman Marcus for them. I think Neiman Marcus is gone. Oh, jeez. Start with that. The unconditional aspect of what it means to be an American citizen. They always talk about neighborliness. I will admit, on the local level, there are some people that still believe in that and will do it unconditionally. But I see more and more mocking it as if it's some sort of loser. And then those types go, oh, well, we can't let the hippies rule. We've been told for decades that they're going to get their black friends and kill us in our sleep. Jesus. Manson was a racist, not a hippie. Let's be clear about this. All right. I think that whole Manson thing causes a lot of people to go, oh my God. No, they were trying to foment a race war because they didn't put the swastikas on their forehead by accident. Let's be clear. All right. It wasn't a joke. Jeez Louise. Well, why don't we actually, I started, with the curated aspects of what we do here at the salon by referencing quite a bit there, and then a jumping off point with the gerrymandering going on in nearly every state. Yep. Texas. What's up with Texas? I'll just say one more thing. That is one racist map. And Texas, I believe, had to fall under the Voting Rights Act, too. That was gutted by the Balls and Strikes judge, Supreme Court Justice Chief John Roberts. Yeah, he sure calls a lot of foul balls fair. Yeah, indeed. Well, on the rest of the menu here, as we start off in the Bistro Cafe, a nuclear engineer and his wife were charged with espionage for trying to pass secrets in a peanut butter conspiracy. There was a band way back in the day called the Peanut Butter Conspiracy. Just letting you know. Little reference there. Yeah, they were trying to pass it on to a foreign power. We don't know which one. But let's just say our intelligence apparatus got involved. The number 2 House Republican, Steve Scalise, I guess I have to say that, refused to say multiple times whether the 2020 election was stolen or not. And the decline in hydropower in the West has put extreme strain on power grids during the drought. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Italian lawmakers called for measures to outlaw pro-fascism groups after 10,000 extreme right anti-vaccine protesters rampaged across Rome. And lava blocks the size of 3-story buildings are being ejected from the La Palma volcano. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our chat room, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln and is, yes, of course, I believe that Netroots Nation is finally ended because it's only for the weekend, but we have a slew of interviews that Kelly and Ricky conducted, and we've got some in the hopper already and ready to go, and a couple that have already been out there for you. So stay tuned for that. And thank you, Kelly and Ricky, for taking care of Netroots Nation for Netroots Radio this year. If you would look across from the chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com to the left again, if you would look across there, you'll find our link to our Patreon page. And since we pay our bills, it's very important that we do, and of course, because of that, we have to ask folks like you out there for money. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford to send us what you might spend on, how about an espresso-type coffee drink? If you could send those funds to us once a month, we are able to stretch those dollars really beyond compare. And we pay our bills and fly under the radar, continue this resistance against this hostile takeover of American democracy. And thank you for your generosity over all these many years, and thank you to those of you who might consider being so generous in the near future. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and a hell of a lot more. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, all one word. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. And get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. So check out the show notes and links because there's all sorts of little tidbits of information from the real reportage and even more. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, the Associated Press brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and Eric Tucker of the AP is the reporter. A Navy nuclear engineer with access to military secrets has been charged with trying to pass information about the design of American nuclear powered submarines to someone he thought was a representative of a foreign government, but who turned out to be an undercover FBI agent, the Justice Department said yesterday, Sunday. In a criminal complaint detailing espionage-related charges against Jonathan Tobe, or is it Toby? We'll say Toby. The government said he sold information for nearly the past year to a contact he believed represented a foreign power. That country was not named in the court documents. Israel? Is it? Toby, age 42, was arrested in West Virginia on Saturday with his wife Diana, age 45, after he had placed a removable memory card at a prearranged dead drop in the state, according to the Justice Department. I believe this particular AP article doesn't give the tidbit of information that they put it in a peanut butter and, I guess, just a peanut butter sandwich. That's why I'm making the reference to the peanut butter conspiracy. And check it out. They were one of the worst bands in the world. Right up there with It's a Beautiful Day. Back to the article at hand. It was not immediately clear whether the Tobys, who are from Annapolis, Maryland, have lawyers, and the Navy declined to comment on Sunday. Declined? The FBI says the scheme began in April of 2020. Wow, hasn't been going on for very long, huh? When Jonathan Toby sent a package of Navy documents to a foreign government and wrote that he was interested in selling to that country operations manuals, performance reports, and other sensitive information. Authorities say he also provided instructions for how to conduct the furtive relationship with a letter that said, "I apologize for this poor translation into your language. Please forward this letter to your military intelligence agency. I believe this information will be of great value to your nation. This is not a hoax." Huh. Interesting. What language was he afraid that he wasn't very fluent in? I wonder. Let's continue because this has a bit of intrigue. That package, which had a return address in Pittsburgh, was obtained by the FBI last December through its legal attaché office in the unspecified foreign country, Israel. The court documents don't explain how the FBI came to receive the package or from whom. In any event, the FBI used Toby's outreach as the launching pad for a months-long undercover operation in which an agent posing as a representative of a foreign contact made contact with Toby and agreed to pay thousands of dollars in cryptocurrency for the information that Toby was offering. After weeks of back and forth over email, the undercover agent in June sent Toby about $10,000 in cryptocurrency, describing it as a sign of good faith and trust, the FBI says. Weeks later, federal agents watched as the Tobys arrived at an agreed-upon location in West Virginia for the exchange, with Diana Toby appearing to serve as a lookout for her husband during the dead drop operation, which the FBI paid $20,000. The FBI recovered a blue memory card wrapped in plastic and placed between two slices of bread on half of a peanut butter sandwich. Couldn't even give him the full sandwich. The records on the memory card included design elements and performance characteristics of Virginia-class submarine reactors. How dare you? The Justice Department describes those submarines as cruise missile fast attack submarines, which incorporate the latest in stealth, intelligence gathering, and weapon systems technology. The memory card also included a typed message that said in part, "I hope your experts are very happy with the sample provided, and I understand the importance of a small exchange to grow our trust." He wanted more money. The FBI conducted similar dead drop exchanges over the next several months, including one in August in Eastern Virginia, in which Toby was paid roughly $70,000 in that instance. Prosecutors say he concealed in a chewing gum package a memory card that contained schematic designs for the Virginia-class submarine. The complaint alleges violations of the Atomic Energy Act, which restricts the disclosure of information related to atomic weapons or nuclear materials. The Tobys are expected to have their initial court appearances tomorrow, Tuesday, in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Jonathan Toby has worked for the U.S. government since 2012, holding a top-secret security clearance and specializing in naval nuclear propulsion. He has also been assigned to a government-owned laboratory in the Pittsburgh area that officials say works on nuclear power for the U.S. Navy. No one answered at the Toby residence on Sunday afternoon in a waterside Annapolis community by the South River. An outside light was on above the door of their home, and a dog barked inside. They probably weren't home. John Cooley, who lives across the street from the Toby, said he counted more than 30 FBI agents on his block on Saturday from about 2:30 p.m. until after dark. He said agents went inside the home. Hope Yen of the AP brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. The House's second-ranking Republican, Steve Scalise, repeatedly refused to say yesterday, Sunday, that the 2020 election was not stolen, standing by Trump's lie that Democrat Joe Biden won the White House because of mass voter fraud. And that wasn't me editorializing there. That was the actual reporter, Hope Yen, from the AP. More than 11 months after Americans picked their president, and almost 9 months since Biden was inaugurated, Scalise was unwilling during a national television interview to acknowledge the legitimacy of the vote, instead sticking to his belief that the election results should not have been certified by Congress because he's a little Mussolini, the square-jawed fascist fuck. That was me. I've been very clear from the beginning, he said. If you look at a number of states that didn't follow their state-passed laws that govern the election for president, that is what the U.S. Constitution says. They don't say the states determine what the rules are. They say the legislators determine the rules, the Louisiana congressman said on Fox News Sunday. Pressed by moderator Chris Wallace on whether the election went beyond a few irregularities to be considered stolen, Scalise responded, "It was not just irregularities. It's the states did not follow the laws set, which the Constitution says they're supposed to follow." So this guy just continues to lie, huh? Well, Trump left office in January, a few weeks after a mob of his supporters stormed the Capitol in a violent riot in an attempt to prevent Congress from formally declaring Biden the winner. As Trump mulls a 2024 presidential bid, he has been intensifying efforts to shame and potentially remove members of his party who are seen as disloyal to his bogus claims that last year's election was illegitimate. House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, who is vying to become Speaker if the GOP takes control after the 2022 midterm election, continues to defend Trump and his false assertions. The big lie continues. In fact, no election was stolen from Trump. His former Attorney General, William Barr, found no evidence of widespread election corruption. Allegations of massive voting fraud have also been dismissed by a succession of judges and refuted by state election officials and an arm of the Homeland Security Department during the Trump administration. Scalise on Sunday appeared to be referring to the legal argument made in several lawsuits backed by Trump before and after last November's election that the Constitution gives the power of election administration exclusively to state lawmakers. The suit sought to invalidate a number of pandemic-era accommodations, including expanded mail voting that was put in place by governors, state election officials, and judges. And why is that? Because you cannot hack a paper ballot. Michael Phyllis of the AP brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. After water levels at a California dam fell to historic lows this summer, the main hydropower plant it feeds was shut down. At the Hoover Dam in Nevada, one of the country's biggest hydropower generators, production is down by 25%. If extreme drought persists, a dam in Arizona could stop producing electricity in the coming years. Severe drought across the West drained reservoirs this year, slashing hydropower production and further stressing the region's power grids. And as extreme weather becomes more common with climate change, grid operators are adapting to swings in hydropower generation. The challenge is finding the right resource or mix of resources that can provide the same energy and power outputs as hydro. Lindsay Buckley, a spokesperson for the California Energy Commission, said, U.S. hydropower generation is expected to decline 14% this year compared with 2020. The project drops are concentrated in western states that rely more heavily on hydropower, with California's production expected to fall by nearly half. The reductions complicate grid operations since hydropower is a relatively flexible renewable energy source that can be easily turned up or down, such as in the evenings when the sun goes down and solar energy generation drops. Power grids linking western regions also offer some relief. While California can face multi-year stretches of dry weather, the Pacific Northwest usually gets enough precipitation in the winter to recover and produce hydropower to export. But this year, the Northwest was also hit by extreme heat and less precipitation. While energy planners account for drought years, climate change over the long term may further reduce the amounts of melting snow in mountains that fill reservoirs in the spring. Guess we better start looking at solar and wind and really good batteries. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, the ayes have it. Ask those over a certain age what they remember when they hear the name Tammy Faye Bakker, and chances are they'll say her eyes. Hence the name of the movie, The Eyes of Tammy Faye. Even by drag queen standards, Tammy loaded up on the makeup, especially around her eyes. Some would also remember that for a period of time, she was one of the most hated women anywhere, symbolizing the worst of 1980s America and the worst of religion, greed, excess, and hypocrisy. For those that don't know, Tammy and her husband Jim Bakker were pioneers in the religious TV business. Their North Carolina-based TV ministry took in millions from viewers before Jim was eventually convicted of various fraud charges. Tammy herself was never charged, but somehow managed to gather more ire than her husband, becoming the punchline of many late-night TV jokes that mocked the couple's downfall. However, she did live long enough to achieve a comeback of sorts in the early aughts and was seen as an LGBTQ icon until her death in 2007. As the film portrays, behind the clownish exterior was a woman who maintained core Christian beliefs in love and charity, not excluding gay people, which was shocking for the time. Jessica Chastain, who stars and produces here, elevates the film above standard biopic fare and makes you feel empathy for her complex character, especially as things come crashing down. She nails the Minnesota accent as well as the charisma that helped Tammy relate to so many. While the supporting cast is effective, it's really Chastain that carries this one, and while it's impossible to know what the real Tammy would have thought of The Eyes of Tammy Faye, it's likely she would have appreciated the capture of her humanity behind the public caricature. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Heart disease and stroke can be catastrophic. They're leading causes of death, disability, and healthcare spending in the U.S., yet they're largely preventable. Alarmingly, heart disease and stroke are taking a toll on middle-aged adults 35 to 64, with over 800,000 deaths and hospitalizations in 2016. Million Hearts is a national initiative focused on preventing 1 million heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular events by 2022. Coordinated actions by Million Hearts partners in communities, healthcare, and public health will keep people healthy, optimize care, and improve outcomes in populations at risk. Everyone has a part to play. Focus on the ABCs of heart health. A. Aspirin use when appropriate. B. Blood pressure control. C. Cholesterol management. And S. Smoking cessation. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Are congressional elections rigged?
I'm Tom Hartman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Consider Texas, which has had 36 congressional districts and due to the 2020 census now will have 38, and where, under the new map drawn by the legislature, 35 of the 38 seats, 92%, are designed to not be remotely competitive. 92%, thanks to what's called packing and cracking. Packing means packing persons with similar voting patterns into one district. Cracking means breaking up such a group into so many different districts that they can't really influence the outcome in any one. With sophisticated computer programs, these numbers can be calculated and predicted with surgical accuracy, and they have been. Placing the 2020 election results into the new districts shows that Trump would have won 23 of the 38 by double digits, and Biden would have won 12 by double digits, meaning that only 3 of the 38 had a margin of 10 points or less. In addition, despite the very large growth in the Latino population, the new map has no majority Latino district. In 2019, the Supreme Court 5-4 ruled that they would do nothing to interfere with partisan gerrymandering. So in Texas, and in every state where that's the norm, you will now be able to know the results of congressional elections before any ballots are cast. How, you might ask? Can you call such a system a democracy?
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because democracy and advocacy begin with you, and freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day acclaimed photojournalist Dorothea Lang died. She is celebrated for her work documenting the Great Depression for the Farm Security Bureau. Lang's photos captured images of migrant workers, sharecroppers, and the rural poor. Her iconic photo, Migrant Mother, is probably her most well-known image. It depicts a despondent Dust Bowl mother surrounded by her hungry children. Lang was born in Hoboken, New Jersey in 1895. She suffered the effects of polio as a child, which left her with a permanent limp. She studied photography at Columbia University in New York and eventually settled in the Bay Area. When the Great Depression hit, she began photographing labor strikes, bread lines in soup kitchens, the homeless, and unemployed. The Resettlement Administration hired her soon after. Nowadays, we can access images from around the world at a moment's notice that broaden our understanding of current events. But until the 1930s, few Americans could access media that adequately depicted the desperate social conditions engulfing the nation. Federal programs that funded projects like Lang's brought Depression-era images into the public eye. Americans soon realized their suffering wasn't caused by personal failure, that millions across the country were experiencing destitution brought on by broader economic forces. During World War II, Lang worked for the War Relocation Authority, where she documented forced evacuation and internment of Japanese Americans. Her images, especially of Manzanar, Hanar were withheld from the public until after the war and were accessible to the public through the National Archives. After the war, she taught at San Francisco's Art Institute and co-founded the magazine Aperture. She has been heralded as an innovator and has influenced generations of documentary photography. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 45 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only about 56 or so, which is a bit cooler than yesterday. We did have a little bit of rain late last night, not a whole lot, but enough to, whet our appetite for it. Partly cloudy throughout the day. Winds will be out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows near 32. We are under an active freeze watch. And winds will be light and variable. Intervals of clouds tomorrow with sunshine. Highs around 60. Winds remaining light and variable. Confirmed cases of coronavirus, of course, have not been updated since Friday, but since late Friday, the confirmed cases had jumped to 222,080 confirmed cases, and the deceased jumped from 285 to 294. Not good. Ragweed pollen is rated high right outside the window here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is at 31 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at 4. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.26 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and relative humidity is at 88%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 61 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 65 and fair. Kyiv is 55 and fair. Kabul is 55 and clear. Hong Kong is 76 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 74 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and sunny. And New York is 65 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Francis D'Amelio of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Italian lawmakers and politicians yesterday, Sunday, called for measures to outlaw pro-fascism groups a day after anti-vaccine protesters, incited by extreme right leaders, stormed a union office in Rome. 12 protesters were either detained or arrested, including Giuliano Castellino, leader of the extreme right Forza Nuova party. Some 10,000 demonstrators turned out to express their outrage on Saturday at a government-imposed requirement that employees have a green pass to enter their workplaces starting next Friday. The passes certify that a person has received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, recently recovered from the virus, or tested negative within 2 days. Cries of Giuliano, Giuliano rose from the crowd on Saturday. Castellino, who due to past violence has been banned from demonstrations in Rome, was allegedly one of the Forza Nuova members who exhorted supporters to storm the national headquarters of the CGIL Labor Confederation. Labor unions in Italy have supported the green passes to make workplaces safer for employees. Scores of demonstrators used sticks, metal bars, and rolled up Italian flags to batter the door and then smash through a window to enter. Inside, computers and phones were knocked to the ground and furniture was overturned. Later, hundreds of demonstrators clashed with police as they tried to reach the square outside the Chigi Palace, home to the premier's office, and near the Italian Parliament.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Silvio Castellanos and Juan Medina of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blocks of molten lava as large as 3-story buildings rolled down a hillside on the Spanish island of La Palma yesterday, Sunday, while a series of tremors shook the ground 3 weeks after the volcano erupted. There were 21 seismic movements yesterday, with the largest measuring 3.8, the Spanish National Geological Institute said, shaking the ground in the villages of Mazo, Fuencaliente, and El Paso. The blocks of red-hot magma flowed down the side of the Cumbre Vieja volcano, were the size of 3-story buildings. Members of the Spanish Navy will help clean volcanic ash that covers large parts of the island, the defense minister said during a visit. The lava flow, with temperatures of up to 2,264 degrees Fahrenheit, destroyed the last few buildings that remained standing in the village of Todok, the Canary Islands Volcanology Institute said on Twitter. There was a partial cone collapse near the volcano's emission vent on Saturday. The collapse of the northern flank of the Cumbre Vieja volcano has caused the release of large blocks of material and the appearance of new flows that run through areas already evacuated, Spain's National Security Department said. The lava has reached the Camino de la Gata industrial estate and new buildings. About 6,000 people have been evacuated from their homes on La Palma, which has about 83,000 inhabitants. Lightning was seen near the eruption early on Saturday. A study published in 2016 by the journal Geophysical Research Letters found lightning can be produced during volcanic eruptions because the collision of ash particles creates an electrical charge. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.